Hello and welcome back for part 2 of my phlox painting, White Phlox and Russian Sage, actually it's called. So I'm trying a different setup as well, so I could show my palette. So I was at this point, so I was painting block in, and I'll continue with main painting now, but not going into much details. So my background, my darks, my lights, and my purple Russian sage. So I was correcting the shapes of some flowers, so I think I'll continue that because I can see some nice warm areas in some flowers that I want to add and see how it will look. It may deepen because some of them are not very fresh, so that's what I was going to do, to add this warm grays and see how it looks. I don't want to go too dark. And there are some gaps for greens as well. Try not to paint petals yet. Only for the one that I need to, I will paint petals later. It's so tempting. It's so tempting to start painting petals. I'll try my best not to. So, okay, so I'm squinting and painting shapes. So I can see some greens coming here. Not as bright, but still not very light, so correct that a little. That's my... Now I realize that I have to correct this area a little bit. Why it doesn't look right, so I kind of messed it a little. So the stem of this phlox goes different way. I just noticed that sometimes things like this happen. You look and you don't notice, and then suddenly you realize what you're doing is not quite right. So this one goes a little higher, and in this area then the stem of this phlox goes there. So I'm trying to correct shapes and trying to avoid details. That's my main target for this part of painting. And sometimes I see some things and sometimes I miss them, but that's part of the process. As long as the painting looks nice and beautiful in the end, that's more important. And I don't have as my task to paint every single petal. I only paint the ones that are beautiful and will respond to my original idea, or when I see I'm done, that's when I think I'm going to finish and think that looks like phlox, and that's enough detail to give. Like, I personally don't like paintings where every single detail is described. That's not the style I like. I prefer the one that where you say more with less, but that's very difficult actually task for lots of artists, but there are artists who can do that, and they're really good artists. And also it depends on the personality and lots of other things. Some people have patience to sit and paint every petal. I don't. So I paint just what I can comprehend enough with my brain, and if I think it looks good for me, I just leave it. I'm trying not to overwork it as well. So anyway, that's a kind of lyrical explanation or discussion, and then I will continue with my painting. I'm not doing the Russian sage yet, even though it is tempting, but I'm letting it to set a little. Like I said, when paint sets, sometimes it's much easier to paint. So I'm using viridian, cadmium, no, transparent oxide brown, a little bit of terra rosa actually, and white intershade of this in the shadow of this particular phlox, because that phlox was the one that already was dying from heat, and I saved it actually because I think it will last at home more. So I'm using green and transparent viridian and transparent oxide brown for the shadow parts and for the greens of this phlox. At the back it's a little bit diluted with white because they're not very bright, and I want kind of make contrast a little bit less because it's at the back, so I'm not really particular want to bring attention to that one. And then same time I'm using viridian and cadmium yellow dip just for lighter areas here, but not too light. They're not as light as the one that in the light, the steel mostly in the shade. There are some nice white stems or stems buds that I can see on top, so I'll add a little bit of light to those. And there is some light falling on the petals on top. And I'm trying to make it very, very light and very, very soft, so this way it doesn't pop out as the main phlox. Also, I don't want to paint what I don't see there. So there is another phlox at the very, very back actually. It's very interesting. So it's almost like gray color. So I'm going to mix cool gray and see how it will look. Yeah, something like that. Because it's really, really dark there. But because petals are transparent, there will be some light in it. So I'm going to mix some white with some of this diluted yellow and put it where I see it. But not too much, because I'm just seeing those petals. And I'm using paint at the back here thinly as well, because it's further from me than the one that in front, and I can use much thicker paint in front. So this is the way to show how this flower is closer. Don't want to lose all my shades that I made when I was blocking in initially. That's why I should be very careful not to overwork it. Actually, I'm adding a little bit of that gray. I liked how that worked. So I'm adding a little bit of this gray to the other flower as well. It's kind of purplish gray. Actually, I had it in my pile of other things. Now I'm going to go back and return to my shapes that were light. Some little stems here, stems for the flowers. There's more of those flowers at the back. Actually, I'm going to add a tiny bit of green to that mixture and see how it works. Because I see some cool greens in there. So at this point I'm just checking my background. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a little bit of background color, mix a little bit of background color and just go and refine some shapes, some contours of some areas. So like I did with this one, and then I kind of left it. I think I see a bigger gap there. Yeah, then it's here. I see a gap here. Just sometimes it's good to do silhouettes of the flowers. With the background. It helps to refine overall shape. Mixing more of that color. I'm not diluting my paints that much anymore. So I'm doing some gaps with this color or darker, so they wouldn't pop out at me. It's like sky holes, the same kind of approach. Doing this, wherever I see gaps, I squint, and I don't have to go through all of them because some of that background color that I put originally, it's actually very thin and it should work. I'm only putting the one that I think is important, or important ones. Yeah, I didn't finish this flower at the back, so should really finish that flower at the back once I refine this form. So this is a lighter part of my background. red light falling from the back there. It's actually too light. Is it too light or too dark? So I'm refining shapes here. So then I'm comparing my background here to the other part of the background, the one that a little darker, so I'm kind of going through here. And as you can see, it is getting actually almost dry. So that's why I say that it's interesting. If you let the paint set, then you can paint over it. And it's only half an hour or so. So now I'm going back into the, I almost said peony, into the phlox at the back. I'm using again the same mix, brown, green and white, a little bit of yellow when needed. So I'm going to just see, it's almost the same color as background, so, but it is actually a little lighter, so I'll have to do background maybe a little lighter or darker. Maybe not, I'll see. So let me try a little bit darker. So these are lighter areas that in the light, so a little bit green, a little bit of white. For those areas, still quite cool. Now I'll bring up my lights once paint sets again. It's another paint will continue setting, and if when it dries next day, I may add a little bit more of lighter, just re-emphasize a little bit of green area there. Like I said, it's not too much of contrast. Not as much as it in front. Another one, there are some stems here, leaves, but I'm not painting all of them, just the impression of that mass of leaves and stems. Now I think I'm going to paint some branches of yellow Russian sage as well, because that kind of gives me idea about where I am with my greens. So I'm mixing some brown and white, but because Russian sage, they're kind of silvery branches, So my darkest darks are going to be not very dark, and especially in the light I will add a lot of white to that mixture. I don't want to overdo with it as well. And I'm using the ridge of my brush. And now I'm going to use the same mixture and a little bit of white, maybe try yellow ochre, and just to see, because my background is also close in value. I don't want to overdo on that. So so I'm adding a little bit more yellow ochre and a little bit more white, just for some branches. Actually, I'm using my medium at this point to make it a little bit more smooth, so my brush could pick up enough paint. Not all of them in the light, so a lot of them in the dark, and then I will start adding some purples. So not sure yet how it will look, we'll see. So that purple, and I added some color to mute that, because when you mix blue and alizarin and ultramarine blue, I added actually a little bit of background color, raw umber, because I don't want them to be very bright. And I added some white, so try to make two different mixtures actually, just to see how it will look, because some of them are not opened and some of them are. So I'll do the darker flowers first, kind of dark green. So the tiny bells or whatever they are. In some areas more of them. So I'm just using again the tip of my brush, just trying to create kind of rhythm. Hopefully it works as a rhythmic arrangement, because if you overdo and do too many, it will look odd. Some of them small, some of them, sometimes I think they remind me of lavender, but they're not really like lavender. It's a prairie version of lavender, I would say, because nothing grows here, even though I have lavender in my garden. But you have to enjoy what you have here. So I'm happy that this summer is hot and some of the things grew that normally wouldn't grow here. So there's one branch here. I don't know if I need it really, maybe not. Okay, so now I need to fix it. So now I need to fix it. Put purple, so now I need to put yellow. Actually, yeah, I'll fix when paint sets. I will do green one as well. So this seems to be again paint set already, because linen kind of, I think it has this good absorbency, at the same time it's smooth, so it's really nice surface to paint on. If you compared with cotton. Such a huge difference. So I'll continue with my flowers. So I'll have to finish. So there is some purple here. There's lots here. But like I said, I'm not going to paint. I'll try to squint and see where is the majority. Some of them are not opened and they only look like indication of the flower. And because they are far away, they're hardly noticeable as flowers even. So I'm adding a little bit of more white, and in some areas where is light, I'm trying to use. Actually, I have cobalt. Happen to have cobalt on my panel, so where I added cobalt and white. So I'll just show this color. It's pretty basic purple color. It's just variations of more blue, more red, cooler, warmer. So in the light it will be cooler and will be more blue and white, and in the dark it will be purple and more red. And now I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. Take my background color and go and kind of refine their shapes, not to have too much. So I kind of paint over them. Over, yes. I paint over the shapes where I don't need them. So that raw umber gets some bits in it very fast. As soon as out of the tube, it's already going dry and kind of crumbles or something in it. So I'm using the ridge of my brush. Or like the side of my brush. I think not the ridge, but the side. So some of this bend. And then again I'm using background. Till background is pretty thin. I don't want too thick with background. That's background, not front. Okay, so it's kind of gives us idea that we have Russian sage at the back, or some kind of lavender looking flower. But only indication, don't need much of. I'm trying to see where my background gets lighter and where it gets darker, so it's kind of neutral here. I think I'm going to leave these flowers for now. think I made it too purple, but it might be good because there are some very purple flowers there. So I'll just add a little bit of purple in the dark here and a little bit of purple here. That should be enough for now. There is tiny bits here. There is one here. And that's about it, I think. From small branches, don't want to add them just randomly. Actually, also in one of the workshops with Kathy Anderson, and she was saying you have to be very, very careful how you add your branches, because even just one stem can make, like, either spoil or improve painting. So you have to be like very careful. And in another workshop with Daniel Keys, and on his videotape that I had a lesson, he was saying don't paint what you don't see. And I think that's a very important thing. Sometimes lots of people, not just me, lots of people just continue painting randomly even when they don't see that. And I think at that point, I'm sorry, I'm wiping my hands. At that point your brain gets tired and you should just take a break and stop completely. But don't do anything. So I used to paint, sometimes I would just paint and don't even notice at the time when I already paint something that absolutely not there. So I'm learning slowly myself. Okay, so I think now I'm going to just add a tiny bit of more greens and browns to the vase. That will be difficult because that's where my camera stands, my phone. Anyway, I'll try it carefully. I'm going to refine the shape of the jar anyway in the final, when I will be doing final refining. Sorry. Now I need to do it with background here, just a tiny bit. Because I know that it's a little bit bigger on one side and a little bit small on the other side, so I have to do kind of making it a little bigger on this side. And then use background color again. So that's a difficult thing because I can't get to my painting. That's okay. Maybe I'll do it later with a small brush. Once I finish filming. So I think I'm going to lighten a little bit this area, because where the light falls through on the jar, just a little where I see it. So I see it here. Not to lose my brown color I had. So I think I need to go through the stems and leaves, that's the darkest in the jar. Again, I'm not going to paint detailed content of the jar, just the major shapes. And again, I'll try to keep it soft because it's water, so water is normally painted very softly. And I can see a little bit of blue, so I'll use blue and brown for the bottom of the jar. Normally on the opposite side there is that light that's passing through, so I always like to watch for that light because it kind of brings jar to life once you've painted. So sometimes it's a mix of white and yellow, depending how also bright it is outside. Could be slightly white, could be slightly purpley. Just a combination of few colors. It's always interesting to observe it. Try not to work too much on it. So I lost my corner of the jar. And my original color. I think I'm going to leave the jar for now. I will re-emphasize my shape here as well, the light that's passing out of the jar. So the lightest stems in the jar, I'm going to use some green and yellow and white, because there are some very light stems here as well. There are some light leaves, so I'm just indicating the one that fall into the light. Don't have to paint many of them. I think normally it's just enough to indicate. And so where my light is for the highlight, I want to make it a little lighter. So for highlight I'm using white and just tiny bit of, in this particular case I was using green, but you can use blue, or like normally they say it's color of your highlight, sorry, color of your light. So in my case it should be color of sky. So kind of mist this bit. Should change my brush really, but I just like this brush, it's new. I missed some ducks now, so I'm going to bring them back. Anyway, I think I will change a brush because that would be easier with highlight and other stuff. So I'm going just to use a little bit of blue. So this is a sticking part of the jar, and this another one. And then I'm going to kind of refine it a little. Paint this one ridge as well. So depending what other ridges in the jar you have, you can just use a mix of, if you squint, it could be either white or blue, brown, whatever like light you have there. So in my case it's kind of green, brown and blue, and I keep, because of my inconvenience of sitting, keep making it worse for myself. It's a very packed jar, so I use, like, it's almost full of greens, so I'm trying to see if there are any gaps there. So I think there is a little bit of gap on light passing through there. So now I'm going to return my highlight back where it was. And normally for highlight I would use some medium to make it very pliable, so it would sit well on brush and then it would sit well on the jar. My highlight is a little bit smaller here. So I think I'm going to return this dark area that was here where the leaves are, because it looks better and more realistic. It's funny how the first impression always right, and how you're getting it in. Anyway, I think I will look at jar again and double check the shape. I think my shape is still not 100% there, but I don't want to mess with it, as I always do, because I'm only making it worse, not better. So normally I either put it at the back, I have an easel at the back, or, and as soon as I look at it I see where I'm wrong, or I take a photo and I see where it goes wrong. But for now, when I see it and I can't walk back, I can't really see what is straight and what is not straight. So normally I would use a small brush for flowers, but in this case what I'm going to do pointed, like a really small brush, pointed brush for middles of the flowers, because again, it's dark and it's green and brown, so I'm going to do that. So I'll just show how I do those normally. So I'll put those, because once you have the middle of the flower, you know where it is. So I'll do something like this, and then I will go with the details for the flowers themselves and go like this, like with petals. So that's kind of how I would go with details. So I probably will do another one for details specifically, and I'll see if I do another one or not. But that's kind of where I'm leaving it now. So I hope to see you next time. Bye.